How's it going? Welcome to day 2 of our life stage, our Voxnest life stage at Podcast Movement. How's it been for y'all? How's Podcast Movement been? Yeah? Who's not overwhelmed at all by the choices? Nobody, right? I love it. So, how many here have podcasts? Raise your hand. Who wants to be engaging and entertaining and relatable in their content to people? Right? Right? Not you? You don't want to do that? You're like, no, I don't want it. And it's hard to do that, right? Because we talk so much about our personal experiences, or we ask questions based on our own perspectives, and we try to be funny in our own way. Being funny is one of the easiest ways you can get someone to engage with you on your content, but it's hard. Because when I look at something and I'm like, that's funny, I don't know why it's funny. I look at it, I'm like, cool, haha, haha. That's it. I want to learn how to be more funny, how to be more engaging, how to be relatable, as well as useful in my content, in my podcast. So today, we will have the discussions with some laugh makers to understand what actually makes people laugh through content. We will have, I'm really excited about this. So please, give a round of applause as we welcome to the stage our panelists, Ben Lapidus from Gay Future Podcast, Brian Thompson from Pizzaply Network, Jonathan Zenti from Spreaker, and Christina Loring from Cooking by Air. Woo! Yes! Boom, 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 boom! Hello, hello, hello. And Christina Friel, I did not have that in my notes. Woohoo! All right.
Thank you, Moby. Thanks to all of you. Welcome to the first of 3 Voxnest live stage panel that we have today. The first one is about how to make people laugh. And if you are a bit in the podcast business and industry, you know that there's a genuine hunt for comedians and comedy podcasts because they sell out a lot. And but the question is that like skill of making people laugh so easy to find? Is it something that we can learn and we can teach to other people in order to make it bigger and have more people doing that? I don't think we're gonna answer these questions today. I think it's, I don't know, I'm pretty sure that nobody knows. But we're gonna listen to some stuff and try to explain what happened behind the curtain. So thanks again to all of you to be here. And I would like to start this because when I asked to Brian Thompson to come here at the Podcast Movement and be on this panel, I said, I don't know if people laugh with my podcast, but it's okay, I can come. And I never told you, but the first time I listened to Whatever Happened to Pizza at McDonald's, I was on a bus, and there's this moment when you read the letter that you received from the Panelists network that they didn't want you to use their name.
It's called a cease and desist.
Yeah. And I was on a bus, and I was drinking coffee with my mug, and I started laughing very louder, and people were looking at me awkwardly, and I started spitting coffee on my t-shirt, and I had to drop off the bus to laugh on the street alone and in peace. So I wanted to ask you, when did you start to think about this podcast? How did you relate with the fact that the audience might laugh or not?
I started thinking about the podcast at about 11:30 p.m. one night, and then the first episode was published at about 3 a.m. the same morning. The whole point of my podcast, when I first started it, was the joke was going to be that it was an investigative journalism podcast because I was listening to a lot of those that I thought were very, not very... I can give you some more volume.
Is it possible to have a little bit more volume. They can't hear down there. Thank you.
So I was listening to a lot of these true crime investigative journalism podcasts that were clearly made by people who did not have any actual expertise. And so the idea was to think of the stupidest possible thing you could investigate that's not really a mystery. And I settled on why McDonald's stopped serving pizza in the early 90s. And but the joke of the show was just going to be that it was a real podcast. So it was going to be on iTunes, it was going to have a Twitter page, it was going to have all those things, but it was just going to be one episode. And it was going to be me calling a McDonald's and saying, why do you not have pizza anymore? And they were going to say, I don't know what you're talking about or whatever, and then that would be it. And I would say, case closed. Thank you for listening to whatever happened to pizza at McDonald's. And part of that joke was that I just said it was on the Panoply network and made the art for the show include the Panoply logo and put it on iTunes as being on the Panoply network. And
it was plausible because at that time Panoply had all kind of shows in their
look. I don't think it
list,
reflects very highly on the Panoply network that it was plausible, because I later found out that they had literally like 150 shows, but people immediately started listening because I forgot I have some well-known friends who promoted it to their fans, and so I had to start doing more. And it took a strangely long time for Panoply to send me a cease and desist, but they finally did. That was a real letter. I read the real letter on the show, but I told them that I was the victim of a grift by a gentleman who represented himself as Mark Panoply, the CEO of the Panoply Network. But it was actually an arch nemesis of mine who had conned me many times, tricked me into this humiliating experience. So that's why my show is now on Pizzaply. Once the Panoply Network, I spent a long time begging Panoply to actually put me on their network for real, never got a response. And then when they crashed and burned, I took great pleasure in that and started the Pizzaply network. And that's where we are now.
And we're going to listen to a clip that it's about a phone call to a UFO line. Can you quickly tell us what it's about? And
yeah, so my investigation into why McDonald's stopped serving pizza has touched upon the realm of the paranormal. And I found out about this UFO encounter that this guy had in the late 60s near the town in Ohio that served, it was the only McDonald's that still served pizza up until a couple of years ago. And so my plan was to call, I found this 24-hour UFO reporting hotline. My plan was to call and leave a message, but the guy actually picked up and we had a conversation.
Hello?
Hi, is this an adult call, please?
Yes, I'm an adult.
Okay. Your call is coming in right in the midst of dozens of prank calls, sir. I apologize for answering this hotline the way I did, but we're just getting tired of these punk kids.
How many punk kids have been calling in?
Are you calling because you have a UFO report to submit, sir?
Not quite. I'm an investigative journalist, and I was calling just to see how many UFO reports you get in a year on average.
Have you been to our website, sir? We post all of that data so people can help themselves.
Well, I was just wondering if you in particular have heard anything about contact with an extraterrestrial who allegedly goes by the name Enrid Cold.
I don't know the case, but we have 128,000 cases in our website. For me to be able to extract that data instantaneously is unlikely.
Oh, I see. So 128,000 cases. I'm sorry, let me write this down. 100.
Is this a prank call, sir?
And 28. No, sir, I'm trying to get some information about the number of reported UFO sightings. So if you say there were 100...
It's all on our website, sir. You don't have to take it from me. You can add it all up.
Well, that's exactly what I'm trying to do right now.
Yeah.
So how long have you been taking these reports?
I can hardly understand you. So how long have I been what?
Taking these reports?
Since August of 1994 is when I took over as director of the center, and it had been in operation for 20 years prior to that.
I see. So that was roughly 24 years ago, plus 20 years ago would be 44 years. So
The center began in October of 1974.
so 128,000 divided by 44.
No, sir. We started taking reports only when I took over. You have to divide by 25.
Divide by 25.
Look,
Carry the 3.
I'm unconvinced that this is not a prank call.
I don't know what to do to convince you otherwise.
Yeah. Well, how many questions do you have? How can I help you?
Well, I'm asking my questions, but you seem to be very reluctant to answer them.
No, I'm unconvinced it's a serious call. We get calls like yours all the time, and they conclude with people chuckling at our gullibility. That's the problem, you see.
I can absolutely guarantee you that I will not be chuckling at anyone's gullibility or at anything else for that matter, unless, of course, I see something or hear something that I find funny. But I have not heard such a thing so far.
Okay.
I guess that's kind of hard for me to hear, but I think one aspect of that call was that I was trying to calculate the odds. What are the odds that there would be a UFO encounter near the one town in the United States that still served McDonald's pizza? So I was trying to get him to help me do the math. That's why I was asking how many UFO encounters per year there are, and I don't know anything about math, but I was trying to do it in my head while I was talking to that guy.
Okay, thank you. Have you laughed there? Was it okay? So.
Let's take a show of hands. Who laughed?
Nah, that's a good.
But the reason that I wanted to play that clip is because normally when I call people, they are not antagonistic in any way whatsoever. And this is something that I sort of accidentally stumbled upon in doing the show. Whenever I call somebody, I say, my name is Brian Thompson. I'm an investigative journalist. Here's my question. And I think because I'm not actually trying to trick them whenever I call somebody, I'm the dumbest person on the call, and I'm not trying to make them look foolish. So they just think I'm an idiot, and they feel sorry for me, and they try to help me. And I think that is usually what makes those calls work. But I wanted to play that one because it's one of the rare instances where somebody was very antagonistic, and I didn't expect to even talk to a person. So one of the things that I've learned in doing this show is sort of like basic improv skill of being willing to listen to what people are giving you and go along with it and not be too set in what I thought would be the funny thing about whatever any given situation is. And so when I was talking to him, I sort of latched on phrases that he was using that I found particularly amusing, like punk kid. And so then I just like repeat that. I want to try to get him to say punk kid as many times as possible because I found that funny. But it was not something I had a plan for when I started. And I think that's sort of a valuable thing whenever you're doing any kind of comedy, is to be willing to listen to other people and not go for a joke. And you can actually get better results that way because you get genuine situations that are unexpected.
The joke comes up naturally in the situation. Thank you, Brian. Ben and Kristina, there are plenty of scary dystopian future scenarios around in TV show. How did you build your dystopian future scenario in your podcast?
So Connor, the co-writer and co-creator, who couldn't be here today, sadly. He's on a plane. He'll be here in 2 hours. We looked at a lot of young adult fiction for inspiration for the main gay future storyline because it's just ripe with tropes and so many things to make fun of. So we took the classic teen with a dark secret who's kind of an outcast, but then there's this ancient prophecy that he has to fulfill, and he has to defeat this big evil at the end. Of course, it was Clay Aiken, like all young adult.
Yeah, and we should say that the plot of the show is that in the future, the gay agenda has taken over, and it is this dystopian nightmare that there's one boy with a secret. His name's Mikey. And it's actually Mike Pence's manuscript, because this is his dream, nightmare scenario of what the gays would do if they took over. So just for some preface, yeah.
Yeah. So we took sort of those building blocks and all of those tropes from young adult fiction that we all know and love. And on top of it, we just built, a story with tons of absurdist jokes that we hoped our moms would laugh at. And they just listened to it and nodded. And then, we just, from there.
Yeah, okay. We are going to listen a couple of clips. Can you tell us something about the first one?
Yeah. First one's the almost first scene in the pilot episode with Mikey, main character, Tristan, the sidekick, and Chad, the bully. They're all meeting for the first time, and Mikey's saving Tristan from
and
peril.
so since Mikey is straight in this world, that means he's like in the closet. So he's trying to put on this affect, like he knows everything about being gay, and like he's gonna fit right in. But it's very clear that he doesn't, so that's what's in this clip.
Yeah.
Ow, guys, can you not?
Get in the locker, you stupid twink!
Hey, excuse me, that's my locker that you're stuffing that quote-unquote twink into?
Oh, wow! A twink! I didn't realize this was a locker and that this was a twink. I must be freaking blind as a freaking bat.
Wait, you're blind too? Same.
You're picking on a blind kid? But that's not cool.
You should know, you're not cool. Under non-blind, he's a twink, making him primary target for the mass.
That's
right, boys?
Oh, yeah.
That's right. This twink's everything we hate. He's small, he's effeminate, he's dexterous, he's hot.
Hot?
I mean small.
You already said small.
No, I didn't. Who even are you, man? Just some virgin who's never sucked a dick.
Hey! I've sucked like so many dicks.
Oh, yeah? Then what's it like?
It's like hard. So hard. It's like the densest diamond.
What?
And then it melts in your mouth into soup.
It's very clear to me that you have never sucked a dick.
Then it explodes, and all your teeth fall out. And then a larger, older version of you walks in, pats you on the head, and says, "You're sucking a dick." Yes, you are. Kisses you on the forehead, and then does all your chores. So yeah, I've sucked several.
You're a freak.
There it is.
Heavy stuff. So we just thought, how far can we take this dick-sucking joke? And we just really ran with it to the point where a larger, older version of Mikey would come in and kiss him on his forehead and tell him to do all his chores.
Okay. And Ben, can you you work on the sound design as well of the
Yes.
show? And how did you sound design it in a way that it will be funny for the audience?
Well, I think like the overarching joke of Gay Future is that this is like its seriousness is self-contained. So like there's no one within the story is pointing to the fact that this world is ridiculous. Everyone takes the stakes of this world very seriously. And so as a listener, that's funny because it's like, this is clearly so ridiculous. And so the sound and the music, like, I just wanted to make it sound as legit as possible to kind of add to the, the seriousness that kind of all the characters feel about the world. And then also, like, I think so much of just, this is a narrative and we have to, like, be in these spaces with these characters. So it's really important that the comedy that is a part of the situation they're in is clear, and it's hard to understand what the situation is through audio just because, it's hard to orient yourself as a listener. So I think just really focusing on making the situation as clear as possible through clear sound.
Right. Can you tell us a little bit about the second clip we're going to listen to?
Yeah, so the second clip is a mini-sode. It doesn't follow the main character, Mikey. It kind of takes this tangent. In the same world, there is this super group called Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Dykes, and they are like the Fleetwood Mac of this world. And so this is a clip that's kind of a super cut from this mini-sode where you kind of hear just a smattering of the different songs that they write, which, you know, it'll speak for itself, but yeah.
You're watching Logo, the only channel that exists. Now back to our Behind the Music special on Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Dykes.
Their first single is what attracted me as their manager. It was about a mythical witch that liked to twirl around a lot, and the lyrics just blew me away.
She was a spooky, ooky, twirly witch, twirling around that spooky swamp.
Their earthy folk rock sound was unlike anything at the time and propelled them to immediate stardom.
And then there was Sloane, who, due to whatever misfortune befell her that day, rarely made a performance on time. In fact, sometimes we needed to Skype her onto the stage.
Where is she? She's not picking up.
I don't know. Should we just stop playing?
Thank God she didn't pick up the phone that day. It actually led to one of their biggest follow-up hits.
I really see myself as more of a chemist than a musician, even though I'm not that great at maths. I run experiments in sonic alchemy. It's not about the sounds themselves, but the space between the sounds. For instance, take a dog barking. Now, split that in half, stretch that out, and then run it through distortion, and you get this. Is that simple?
What followed was a dark period for the three and a darker period for music lovers everywhere. Cassidy's follow-up solo album, Police State Vagina, was less than a commercial hit.
She was trying to go for a riot girl sound, but it was less fuck the police and more just about the general health of her vagina.
Government. Mind if I come on it?
Meanwhile, Imogen deepened her understanding of sound landscapes with her album Sonic Alchemy, which honestly barely qualified as music.
Tell us, Imogen, what was your creative process on this album?
I wanted to experiment with sounds that were, how do I say this, fully horrible. What?
And as for Sloane, well, she was in a coma.
Up next on Logo, $1 Million Fistings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Kristina.
Not me.
Yeah,
Other
the K, Kristina. So, Cooking by Ear is not a comedy podcast by itself, but it has the potential to meet a lot of funny people. Can you tell us a little bit about the show and the guests that you have and how you work with them?
Yeah, so Cooking by Ear is a cooking podcast, and so it's a cooking show where we invite guests into the kitchen with this chef, Cal Peterno, and he was the head chef at Chez Panisse in Berkeley for many years. It's kind of like a fancy restaurant in Berkeley, and he's really passionate about cooking and wants everybody to be really into cooking. And over the course of the episode, you can follow along and have a dish made. And Cal is like chill surfer California dad vibes and a dry sense of humor, and comes from a very sort of fancy French and Italian cooking background. And so I wanted to invite guests to provide a sort of contrast to that are a little bit more reverent, kind of chaotic and a little crazy in the kitchen, because I think that's how I feel in the kitchen. I'm not a cooker, I'm a professional snacker, and I didn't know words like mise en place or ramekin or bechamel. I didn't know. It's just fancy for mac and cheese, basically, fancy cheese sauce. So I want to guess that we're more like me in that way, where they weren't necessarily taking cooking so seriously, so it was more inviting for our listeners. So that's why the more crazy commentary or the more disaster during the show, the better for us.
Can you tell us a little bit about what we are going to listen
Yeah,
to?
this is more of a montage of just funny, chaotic moments in the kitchen during the over 6 episodes of our first season. So this is a montage of clips. We have, you'll hear from Frances McDormand, the actress, Mira Nair, director, Alexander Payne is the director, Big Frida, Queen of Bounce, Bob the Drag Queen, who's a stand-up comedian and winner of RuPaul's Drag Race Season 8. And Tommy Pico, who is an amazing poet who, well, we'll hear from him, but he is very open about talking about like giving blowjobs in his poetry and sexual stuff, but he was really nervous because he had never cracked an egg before ever in his life, and he's like 34. So anyway, so we'll hear some of that.
This is Cooking by Ear.
A podcast that teaches you how to cook.
You just practice gut laughter. Just like making sure your diaphragm is kind of... I'm Mira Nair, rhymes with fire. So what is this tea you've given me, dear? It feels quite weak.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
What are you looking for?
I'm looking for a robust, deep red color. And it's looking closer to your color than mine, love.
What's up, girl? This is Tommy Pico, writer, editor, and co-host of the podcast Food for Thought. All right, I'm gonna admit something extremely embarrassing. I don't know how to crack an egg.
You already know. I'm Big Frida the Queen Diva, your best believer. Like, everybody love my booty popping potatoes. I have to make this so much.
Oh, you'll appreciate the one line I couldn't get into Sideways, which is when people hold on to their wines too long, and the line is, nobody wants to fuck a 50-year-old virgin.
I'm sure there's like a whole group of people.
Yeah. We live in the Bay Area, so there's something for everyone there. Yes.
So keep practicing, baby. I just gave you the ingredients.
What's the word for the wandering white guy?
Muzungu tea.
Yeah, it's Muzungu.
It's Muzungu tea made in a Muzungu kitchen.
Put your hands on your knees and you arch your back. You put your booty in the air and you twerk like that. You gotta get lower though.
It's cooking by ear.
Cooking by ear. Well, it's a sensual experience. You got to use everything.
Y'all made me come up with a new hook. I'm so serious.
Oh my God, say it again.
Nobody try to steal my shit.
Hey guys, my name is Bob the Drag Queen, also known as Caldwell Tadiku, the actor. You probably know me from, I was the winner of the 8th season of RuPaul's Drag Race. And woo! There's a jar of Koolicles, which is a Kool-Aid pickle. It's a pickle, but you soak it and you mix Kool-Aid into he's laughing at me, Mateo. The chef's laughing at me. You mix Kool-Aid into the pickle juice.
I can't believe you're telling other people that.
And then I have, this is...
Wait, what? And just eat the pickles out of
And
the
then you
jar?
eat the pickle, yeah.
So
it
it's
makes
sweeter?
it sweet. It's like a butter pickle.
But did you
I did it
modify
myself.
the pickle?
Oh yeah,
right on.
And then in my door I have sauces and some more Koolicles. First, like a motto, like when you walk into the room, you walk in like this. Basically what I do is I bevel one leg, put my hand on my hip, and I hold out my arm. It really just is a way of walking into a room with a lot of confidence, regardless of what you have. I did it on the show with this really ugly purse that I had made out of curtains. But I walked in like it was, you know, a Birkin bag. So it's like no matter what you have, you walk into the room like you own the place.
Julia Child's thing was always like...
Julia.
Yeah, her thing was... Is she here too?
Is Julia here?
Bonjour!
Oh, Julia, work.
Her thing was like, never flinch. Like, cover it with whipped cream and serve it like it's the best thing. Purse first.
Julie and Julia, you ever see that movie? Yeah. So I want to do a version called Bob and Bob. It's where I start painting with Bob Ross. I mean...
Purse first. Walk into the room, purse first.
Okay, thank you. Can you tell us, like in a minute, a little bit about the contracts between Carl and the guests and how it works when you have to edit the show and how you put the things together?
Yeah, I think our guests keep us in check. When Cal gets into like a chefy zone and gets really focused on teaching, because we're recording and we're also trying to do things in real time, and we're making a lot of different stuff at once, and then we're also interviewing the guests, so there's a lot going on. Whenever we get too serious and he starts talking in chefy terms, like for instance with Bob, like Bob completely would derail us and be like, no. Like, for example, when we were talking to Bob, the drag queen, and he was talking about how much he loves potatoes, and Beyonce is like, the French fries are the Beyonce of potatoes, and Rihanna's the potato chips of potatoes, and like going on and on. And Cal tried to sort of connect with him and say, oh, I know a really good potato soup. It's vichyssoise. And like, I don't know what vichyssoise is, and Bob didn't know, and he's like, oh yeah, vichyssoise. Like, she was on season 8 of Drag Race. Welcome, vichyssoise. And we were just like, he's trying to sort of connect with the guests, but the contrast of him being so serious and so like earnest about trying to teach people how to cook or get people to love food, with Bob, who's like, I'm just gonna like constantly make pop culture references at the same time, is great. Or he would say, we don't need to use the oven, right? Bob would ask that, and we'd be like, no, we're making soup today. Like, why are you worried about the oven? He's like, I think there's pizza in there from 3 weeks ago. Let's look. And then he opened it up and there was, and he was like screaming. So that's the other thing about, instead of being in a studio or in Cal's kitchen, we're really stepping into other people's homes, and that's when the chaos ensues. They're like really having us as their guests. They're hosting us in a really nice way, so we don't know what's gonna happen. And I was telling you about the Big Frida episode. We were in her home, and the minute we showed up, she was like, I have to go, I forgot an ingredient, and left us in her home by ourselves with her 8 dogs, and they're all loud dogs, and some of them were dyed blue and purple. And so we were just like hanging out with the dogs, and then she came back, and then she's like lighting a cigarette while she's like cooking potatoes for us. And I was like, this is your home, and we feel so welcomed, and we appreciate that. That's not how Cal would cook. He doesn't smoke cigarettes, but like we're down to do this today.
Thank you. We have run out of time, so thanks to all of you. Thanks you from the audience.
Thank you.
We see in 15 minutes with another panel about the never-ending battle between content and industry. And thank you again.
Let's give a huge round of applause for our wonderful panelists. Hello. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We will be back in 15 minutes talking about the battle of content and industry, the relationship between the people who make podcasts, the podcasters, and the industry. Are they friends, relatives, or total strangers? See you here in 15 minutes. Thank you.